Hello, my name is Dan Webster, and this is a special program on Radnor Channel 21 called Responsible Government Matters. I'm here today with Rich Booker. Rich is running as Commissioner for Radnor's 2nd Ward, and I'm going to ask Rich a few questions. Let me start off by giving you a little bit of my background. I've been a Radnor resident in St. David's for the past 10 years. I'm also an active member of Radnor Residents for Responsible Government. I'm a chartered financial analyst and a CPA, and I've been actively following the township's finances for a number of years. Rich, you're running for election as a commissioner on November 5th. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you, and then we'll get into some questions.
Sure, that'd be great.
You've lived in Radnor for the past 14 years.
That's right.
You've been active in local politics. You were actually elected to the school board for a 4-year term, and you served as the chairman of the school board's finance committee.
Yes.
And while there, you managed to save the school board, the school district, several $1 millions by refinancing outstanding bonds.
Yep.
You know a lot about finance. You're currently serving as the director of tax controversy and state tax planning for a major corporation in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, you were a lawyer at a large Philadelphia law firm located in Philadelphia, and you focused on tax-exempt bonds and municipal finance. So I gather you know a lot about municipal finance. You earned a law degree at Temple. You've been married to your wife, Patty, for 23 years. You live in Radnor with your 3 children. And politics and public service runs deep in your family because your wife is also currently a Radnor School Board director.
It's true.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
And because I think people want to hear what you have to say, let me just jump right in here. Let's start off with a topic that's really made headlines over the past year or so in Radnor, and that's the township's recognition of its very significant unfunded liabilities. Last December, the township's Citizens Audit Review and Financial Advisory Committee, which is affectionately known as CARFAC, made a presentation about the township's $236 million of unfunded pension and post-retirement benefit obligations. And those post-retirement benefit obligations are the bulk of the $236 million. They're basically health care costs. Mm-hmm. The township also has noted tens of millions of dollars of deferred capital expenditures, including stormwater infrastructure needs, which has been a big topic of conversation just over the past couple months. How would you address the current and future funding needs of those items specifically?
Well, first of all, Dan, thanks very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you and to the people in Radnor, and look forward to the election November 5th. With respect to your question, I look at this in the 3 buckets that you referred to. When we talk about the unfunded liabilities of Radnor, there's really at least 3 major components. I think you've touched on them. First is the pension obligations. Secondly would be the other post-employment benefits, which, as you alluded to, are primarily the healthcare promises. And then finally, the deferred maintenance or deferred capital expenditures. And I think all of them have a different type of a solution, or at least programmatically and strategically, we look at them a little bit differently. So with respect to pension obligations, I see those as the primary issue, or at least the highest priority to be addressed by the township. Currently about $22 million, I think, in unfunded accrued actuarial liability. And it's not uncommon. Most municipalities are underfunded, have underfunded their pensions when you look at it currently and based on the actuarial tables. A lot of that is due to returns on investment funds and other factors, but typically it is a failure to contribute really what's required on an actuarial basis. I think that the best way to address those liabilities is really a kind of a current strategy where I think that there's very little that we can do with respect to previously promised pension liabilities, but what we can do is we can address what we're doing going forward. So what I'll do is I'll work to minimize and rationalize the workforce in the township to reduce future liabilities. Secondly, we will negotiate and work hard to have a lower contribution requirement. And I think that we can laud our township manager, Bob Zinkowski, who has requested that he be out of the pension fund. He wants to have a 403B plan. And
he's leading by example.
He's leading by example. And I think that that's the concept is right there. Now, whether Bob really should do that or not, we have to think about that. But the concept is we need our employees to contribute more. That's what I'll ask. I'll ask for our employees to contribute more to their pension, and I'll ask our township existing employees to be more efficient and to maximize their output, because it's all about keeping our workforce as efficient and as small as we can and still serve the township. So that's number one. With respect to our other post-employment benefits and specifically the health care, that's a tougher issue. For all of our retirees, we have promised health care and other benefits, and it's a substantial sum that will need to be funded. I think that we've made a start in funding that unfunded obligation through using a piece of a windfall that we received from a business privilege tax settlement. It was an $8 million settlement, and we're using some of that money to help towards that obligation. So those types of unanticipated revenue windfalls are a good way to start that. In addition, I think that we need to work, once again, in rationalizing and improving the efficiency of our workforce. We have savings that we can channel towards that effort as well. Finally, with respect to the capital projects.
Yeah, let's talk about the infrastructure and the stormwater specifically, since that's a hot topic recently.
Especially for me. It's one of my concerns is a new stormwater tax that's being imposed by the township. They're calling it a stormwater fee. Now, the stormwater fee is going to be imposed on every property owner in Radnor. It will be based on what they're calling it, the impervious surface on your property. However, that's not how they're defining it right now. What they're defining it based on is just the square footage of your lot. So if it's an acre or more, it'll be 4 units. If it's a quarter acre, it's 1 unit.
Right.
Each unit is $29. So you figure out how many acres you have on your site or your property, and you can determine what the fee will be.
And just to clarify that a little bit more for the viewers, the fee is $29 per unit, and it had been $58, and then later in the process they reduced it by about half. You might expect it to go up eventually, back up to 58. But the residential property owners will pay between $29 and 4 times that, which I believe is $116.
$116.
And then the other property owners, the commercial property owners and the nonprofits or the tax-exempt properties will also pay. And they'll pay based on how much impervious surface they have on their property.
Right.
Things like parking lots and roof structures and sidewalks and things like that.
Right. And the impervious is meant to apply to everyone, and they've done some calculations to get to that. But that's the point. But it is an area of concern for me. What I see it as a new tax, and I see it as something that I disagree with. The township has known about and studied stormwater issues for the past 2 decades, and the township has decided that they are not going to address them. It's choices that the former boards have made. In fact, there was a project somewhat recently in Wayne when we redid the middle school. We rebuilt the entire middle school. We put in some new stormwater structures, and we were supposed to connect the existing township stormwater system to that new system. It was never completed. In addition, as I talked about, the Board of Commissioners decided that they wanted to have a new building, a nice building that they have. They obviously have overbuilt it because the building is now, they want to rent out the second floor. In addition to that, we have a pocket park that one of the commissioners especially took pride and wanted to use open space for. So we open space money for. We've had
That's right on Lancaster Avenue.
on Lancaster Avenue. We have had money to deal with these issues, but our Board of Commissioners have made other choices. And I think it's wrong now to impose that type of the solution. The only solution that they can come up with is to impose a new tax on the township. And I disagree with that kind of a solution. The issue should have been addressed previously through the issuance of bonds or through other means. And the project should have been prioritized in a proper capital plan. So obviously, I think there's some kind of a failure in the capital planning process if we haven't addressed these issues, and they truly are as significant as what we're being told.
And there's some discussion about the stormwater issue being a broader than Radnor Township type of issue as well.
Right.
Because water doesn't just start and end here in Radnor Township. It comes from and flows to other adjacent areas.
Into the Schuylkill or the Delaware River watershed, which encompasses various of our all of the nearby counties. So my proposal would be rather than an additional tax on our constituents, I would propose a stormwater authority, either a regional or a county authority. That was recently provided for in the budget by Governor Corbett. A stormwater authority would have the authority to issue bonds, and they would have a different funding source, and it wouldn't be directly on the township residents. In utilizing a regional or a county stormwater authority, we would be able to spread the burden even to a greater area, to more people who have more of the problem as far as where the problem emanates from. And in addition to that, we won't have such a concentration of the benefit, right?
Okay.
So this is really kind of an area where we have spreading the burden and
Right.
concentrating the benefit. So
Okay.
I want to do something else with that.
And Rich, we're just about out of time. I want to give you an opportunity to let the voters know why it is you are running for office, and if you're elected, how would you run as a commissioner? How would you operate as a commissioner? So why don't you spend a minute on that, and then we'll finish up here.
Well, ultimately, I'm running to make a difference. To make a difference to the governance of Radnor. I want to improve the operational efficiency and lower expenses related to the township's operations. I believe that the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners works best when the skills of each participant complement each other. My candidacy brings expertise in tax law, municipal finance, and with the departure of Kevin Higgins, who also was a finance expert, I bring the knowledge and experience to lead the township to a better, more stable financial condition and potentially improved credit rating. One of the other areas, one of the things we didn't talk about is something that we're working on. We'd like to develop a new comprehensive master plan for Radnor's Second Ward. And I'm calling for a new citizens committee to be put together to develop that plan so that we can help to address some of the development issues that face the Second Ward.
And
so I'm asking for volunteers for that.
And that's something like was done in Garrett Hill, correct?
It's modeled after the very successful Garrett Hill program.
Well, Rich, thank you very much, and good luck to you on November 5th.
Thank you
as
very
you
much.
run for candidate for Second Ward Commissioner here in Radnor. For Responsible Government Matters, I'm Dan Webster. Thank you, Channel 21, for hosting this show. And please remember to pay attention to what's happening in your local government. Thank you. Hello, my name is Dan Webster, and this is a special program on Radnor Channel 21 called Responsible Government Matters. I'm here today with Second Ward Commissioner candidate Rich Booker, and we're going to talk about some of the issues that are facing Radnor. Let me introduce myself. I have been a Radnor resident for about 10 years, living in St. David's. I'm a financial analyst and a CPA. I've been following Radnor fiscal issues for a number of years now, and I'm also an active member of Radnor Residents for Responsible Government. Rich, I think it'd be helpful, first of all, welcome. I think it'd be helpful if I gave the viewers a little bit of your background before we get started here.
Thank you very much.
You've lived in Radnor now for 14 years. You've been active in local politics during that time. In fact, you were elected to a 4-year term as a school board director, where you served as a chairman of the finance committee.
Right.
And one of your achievements then was saving the school district some number of millions of dollars by overseeing the refinancing of some outstanding bond issues. You know a lot about finance. You have a position as Director of Tax Controversy and State Tax Planning for a major corporation here in Philadelphia. Prior to that, you were a lawyer at a major law firm in Philadelphia, and you were focused on tax-exempt bonds and municipal finance.
Great.
You earned a law degree at Temple. You live in Radnor with your wife, Patty, of 23 years, and 3 children, all of whom attended Radnor schools.
Correct.
And I guess public service runs deep in your family, because Patty is currently serving as a school board director in Radnor. So I think the public would like to hear your view on some issues in facing Radnor right now. So let's just jump right into that. One of the big things that's happening right now is the Board of Commissioners will be making some decisions that could have some major impact on Radnor residents and taxpayers for years and years to come, related to development and redevelopment opportunities in the township. So let me give some examples. The township's potential purchase of a large tract of Ardrossan land, and then the overall approval of the Ardrossan development proposal. The implementation of a recent ordinance that waived most zoning restrictions for the township on township-owned and controlled properties. The ordinance that Villanova University has proposed for development on their south parking lots. An ordinance that I believe could be extended to other universities in the township if it were approved.
Right.
And lastly, the ordinance that has been proposed by Biomed, which is in your ward, for the development of the former Wyeth Laboratory Complex, which is across from the high school.
Correct.
And again, if that were adopted, it could apply to other properties on King of Prussia Road.
It certainly would.
So maybe you could talk about what some of the implications of that could be for the character of your ward and for Radnor. Much of this has been or will be accomplished by the use of ordinances rather than going through the traditional process of waivers or zoning relief. So what's your position on the use of that method for the township to bring about these changes? And what's your position on those specific proposals?
Well, first of all, this question, I think, really at its heart goes to the issue of transparency in government. What you talked about there with Ardrossan and with Biomed really is kind of a systemic issue related to deals that our Board of Commissioners currently are undertaking that are not in the light of day. These are transactions that are covered by the exception from the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act related to executive session. However, the nature of these deals are such that they really need to have a lot more public input, public notice, and public involvement. Currently, the Board of Commissioners is anticipating acquiring 40 acres or so of the Ardrossan tract. It's not all 300 acres, as some people believe, but what exactly they're going to buy, how they're going to buy it, we really don't know.
How much they're going to pay?
How much they're going to pay. The rumor is $12 million. We really don't know what we're going to get for that. Secondly, the Township Board of Commissioners has also entered into a deal with the developer for the Biomed facility, and it's also rumored that the township will be developing in connection with this the Biomed group a new sports facility that would be 225,000 square feet.
This is the ice skating rink.
Ice skating rink, and apparently it'll be like a 3,000 seats.
Okay.
So this will be more than a skating rink, I think. But the theory is, once again, we don't know what the deal is. We don't know what they promised. But I think that it is evident that the township will be granting the developer use of eight acres of land or conveying the land to them. So these kind of deals are really questionable, and they shouldn't be undertaken by our Board of Commissioners without the public being involved, without there being some kind of a hearing, and without there being some disclosure of what the plans are. And with respect to Ardrossan specifically, there was a referendum in 2006, and that was related to establishing a fund for the preservation of open space. That was not, contrary to what some of the commissioners believe, that was not an okay to buy a specific tract or parcel of land. It was really a funding mechanism. And the CB Fact, which is the Citizens Budget, Finance,
and Financial Advisory Committee, right?
Advisory Committee.
The precursor to CARFAC, right?
The CB Fact, exactly, the precursor, recommended and saw it as something that would require a new referendum for a specific tract of land to be acquired. That really should be brought up to the voters once again for their approval. And it should not be done in a backroom deal with the developer like we currently are looking at. But to the second part of your question, it's more than just the transparency. It's also the methodology by which these projects are going to be undertaken. You talked about conditional use ordinance. So instead of the developer coming in and saying, hey, I want to build this on my site, I would like to get a waiver of certain zoning, or I'd like to get a hardship exception from the various building requirements on my site. That's not what these developers are doing. What they're doing is they're writing a conditional use ordinance that would apply to zoning in which their project is located. In the case of Villanova, it would apply to institutional. So it would apply to the other universities, Eastern, also to Cabrini, Valley Forge Military Academy. In the case of Biomed, they're asking for a conditional use ordinance related to planned laboratory office. And there's several other developments owned by Brandywine that this would apply to as well. And the concept is that they would get a special overlay ordinance so that they would have a waiver from the standard rules in the township to build their facility under this ordinance. Now, the problem with that is that there's a lot of unforeseen issues. This will be applied and will be something that we'll have to argue with other developers for. Mm-hmm. It's also goes to the issue of transparency as well. It's not as transparent for the people in the township. The people in the township don't know exactly what it is they're going to build or how a conditional use ordinance would apply to a project. Right. It's much easier to focus on a project.
So let me ask you a question. Are you anti-development? Is that what you're suggesting here?
Well, no. As a matter of fact, I'm very pro-business. And no one's more pro-business than I am. As a businessman myself, I recognize the need for it. And in addition to that, I think we all want to see the Biomed site redeveloped. People in my neighborhood, we want to see, it's an old building, an old property. We would love to see a first-class property developed there. So that's what we want. But what we want to do and what we should do, and what I'll insist on as commissioner, is that everybody play by the same rules. What we want to have, I want to have business in Radnor. We want them to develop. We just want them to conform to the current ordinance. And doing a conditional use ordinance, it's too much for the Planning Commission, for the Board of Commissioners, for the other people involved to be able to calculate every potential use from every waiver that's contained within that ordinance. And therefore, I think that we should not use that methodology.
It's very complicated, and I suspect that it's also difficult for the citizens to follow along as well. It's not like you have a specific zoning ordinance and you know what variances might be necessary from that zoning ordinance to get a development done.
absolutely the case.
Now, the biomed development is in your ward, the second ward.
Right.
Are there implications to that for, let me ask you a broader question. If you were elected as commissioner on November 5th, what would you do specifically with that development, but also more generally in the second ward?
Well, first of all, what we're proposing on the biomed site with the conditional use ordinance is a vast increase in the density that would be permitted in that zoning use. So what they're currently proposing to, where we have right now is an office building, the former Wyeth building. We would now have new office towers. We would have a new residential component of 200 or more apartments. We would have a hotel in addition to a new parking garage and other. So with that type of density, we would be giving an invitation to Brandywine for the locations at Radnor Corporate Center and also the former Chilton building. They would be able to utilize that same ordinance to increase the density on their site.
So it's not something that necessarily just affects that portion of King of Prussia Road. It could affect all the way down to down to the Radnor Corporate Center on Matson Ford.
Matson Ford Road.
And also, would it also be the St. David's Center down there, the old Sears building?
No, that's outside. That's
that would be
different zoning.
Okay.
It would be the former Chilton building. Okay. So we're very concerned about that. What we want to do is maintain the quality of life for the residents in the neighborhoods in the second ward. And we feel that this definitely has the potential for increasing by a vast amount the traffic in the morning and the evenings. It could add 500 trips. It could make it virtually impassable for our neighborhood, which is on the other side of the railroad tracks, in the neighborhoods there by King of Prussia Road and Glen Mary and St. David's and our whole ward, all the way out to Upper Gulf. So what I'm calling for is a new citizens committee that would be modeled after the successful Garrett Hill program, and it would basically be a group of people that could work on a master plan for development in the second ward. And Bob Zinkowski actually said that when I made this comment, he actually agreed that it was necessary. So the township manager apparently also agrees with this. But the concept is we want to make sure that we preserve our quality of life for Radnor residents, and we're not crowded out by corporate development in our neighborhood. So I think that's something that I'm asking for volunteers for, and we're working on putting together that kind of a group.
Understood. Great. Well, thank you. Again, Rich Booker is running for Township Commissioner in the second ward. Elections November 5th. Good luck to you, Rich.
Thank you very much, Dan.
For Responsible Government Matters on Channel 21, I'm Dan Webster, reminding you to please pay attention to what's happening in your local government. Thank you. Thanks, Rich.